So I have two big stacks of books that I would like to unhaul. And this unhaul video is going to be not like any other that I've done before. The two stacks of books that I have here are all books that I've either read or hard DNF'd. So I'm not getting rid of anything that I haven't yet read. So I can kind of tell you a little bit about why I'm unhauling these books other than I've lost interest. And I think that's going to be really cool because the last few months I have been doing so many reading vlogs. I've read so many books and a lot of them were successes and there were a lot that weren't. And so I've been accumulating these books ready to kind of tell you all about them in a book unhaul. So please do like the video if you enjoy, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into my unhaul. I can't remember how many books are here. There's 31. 31 books here. I should have just gotten one more, but I don't want to force myself to unhaul a book just to hit a number, but like we're doing 31. Or maybe I should like save one and just do 30, I don't know. Anyway, one of the first books I want to unhaul is Murder at Holly House by Denzel Mayrick. I did end up DNFing this one in December. I really despised a lot of the humor in this. The way that the characters were written, the humor that they have was written by somebody who was a lot older than I. And so the humor that they were trying to embolden their characters with just wasn't really something to my taste. This one follows an inspector and he goes to this place where someone was found dead in a chimney. He's kind of new to the area, so I did kind of like the village aspect of it. And this is set in 1952, so it's a little bit historical. And it didn't give me any of the Christmassy vibes that it was promising. And yeah, it sounded like Holly House and things, but it really under-delivered on any of the festive cheer that I was looking for. I really did feel like the Grinch stole Christmas in this, because I couldn't feel the Christmas. So yeah, this was a DNF. I can't remember how far in I got, but I did read it in my festive Snake Across My Bookshelves video, so you can get more of my thoughts on there and exactly where I DNF to. A book that I did complete, and it's actually like no surprise to anyone that I'm going to be unhauling this, but it is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And I am promising you right here, right now, I am not going to purchase another Grady Hendrix book. I like his older stuff. His newer stuff is not for me. But I was sucked in by the witchcraft angle of this, which is an angle of this book that I felt totally under-delivered as well. Just like the festive vibes of Murder at Holly House, this one I think didn't really touch on the witchcraft enough that I wanted anyway as a reader. And even the parts of witchcraft that this does tackle, it was just so uninspired and the opposite of creative that I really didn't feel like there was enough passion put into the writing of this story. I think Grady Hendrix needs to take a few, I feel like, in my humble opinion, that Grady Hendrix needs to take a few business years to kind of get that creative energy back and kind of make me a little bit more scared. This wasn't scary to me. It didn't feel... I mean, there are definitely elements of horror 100%, and the initial premise of this too, of like this home for wayward girls where, you know, they've been ostracized from society because of a multitude of reasons. So I feel like those kinds of issues were tackled pretty well. But as a story, characters didn't care for, story didn't care for, witchcraft was so uninspired. I didn't like it. I really didn't like it, but it doesn't shock anyone. So obviously this is going to get unhauled. And I do want to say as well, anything that I unhaul, I will be giving to my local library as always. I did read A Lesson in Vengeance quite recently by Victoria Lee, and I did like it. Like, when I got to the end of this, I was like, I actually like this more than I thought, because I think over the years, dark academia has just not really been that much for me. So I went into this with maybe some lower expectations, but it was kind of entertaining. It was kind of fun, but I don't really like the ending, and I will never reread this. I think it went maybe a little bit too off the rails as it went on, and this is a very recent read too. I think I only read it like last month. This also had elements of witchcraft, but again, I don't think it really... I mean, it definitely did better than Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, 100%. But I guess I'm really hard to please when it comes to witchcraft, since witches are my favorite mythological creatures and, like, you know, things like that. So I am very hard to please when it comes to witches. And so, yeah, this didn't really scratch that witchy itch that I have deep in my bowels. But it was still rather entertaining. I did make it to the end. And yeah, ending kind of let it down for me personally. Never gonna reread, never gonna reread. Oh, one that I really don't have that many opinions on is Delicate Dream Department Store by Mai Lee. I read this a good while ago. It must have been about a year, and maybe 2 years, I don't know now. Whenever this came out and I went to Jade's, was it like April 2024 or something like that when I got this? It's been a while, but I don't have any feelings towards it. And I feel the same way with quite a few, like, healing fiction novels that I've read over the past few months, I read them and I'm like, okay, like it exists. It was a book I read, but I don't really get a chance to formulate a whole lot of opinions on them because they are pretty slice of life. And, you know, unless they're emotional, I don't really feel like I have too much of an opinion on. So this one, totally, like, it's been a while now and I can't really remember too much about it other than the fact that this is set at a kind of department store, and this department store pretty much sells dreams. And like, it sounds great, honestly. It does sound great on paper, but I feel like with these kinds of slice of life books, the plot isn't really the biggest focus of this. It's definitely character and the journey they go on and what they can discover about themselves. And that's honestly fine. But the more I read of this kind of fiction, the more I realize, just like Dark Academia, it just isn't really for me, I don't think. I'm still willing to try them if they have like a really cozy vibe and stuff, but at the same time, I feel like I had to be in such a specific mood. So I did like this. It wasn't, again, like a bad book or anything, but it's a one that's just going to take up space on my shelves, and I feel like it will be more better read elsewhere. Speaking of another kind of Dark Academia book that just really didn't grip me, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I've had this on my shelf for years. I was so glad I got to it last month, and yeah, it started off well. I really enjoyed the start of this, and I did really like, was it like 250 to like page 350? There was like a good 100-page chunk in the middle as well, and then I'm just like, it goes on too long. It talks too much. It doesn't need to talk that much. There's a lot of waffle. And I'm starting to think Dark Academia is not for me because there is a big focus on academics, obviously. And I've learned over the years, I don't really care to know about their class schedules. I don't care to know about their seminars or their lectures and things like that. Like, I don't find that fascinating because they never go in depth with this, like the lectures and the seminars. We're just kind of like told about what they're doing. They're on this campus, they're living this like life on campus and stuff like that. But like, I don't feel it when I'm there. Like, I went to uni myself and I did love it. I loved lectures, I loved seminars, and I feel like I'm learning something from that. And I don't feel like having this kind of setting in a university or a college or any kind of academic setting, I'm not learning what they're learning in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, I'm not learning as they're doing their studies. So I feel like I'm taking nothing from them doing it, which honestly, it sounds so convoluted, doesn't it? It sounds so self-obsessed, but I think that's why I don't like Dark Academia that much. Because if the plot doesn't really sell it for me, if the plot takes too long to get into it, or it's not exciting enough to grip me, then the other biggest factor of what makes a Dark Academia stand out from other pieces of literature is the academic side of it, but I don't find that interesting either. So I'm between a rock and a hard place when it comes to these. So unless like there is a full-on chapter dedicated to actually learning something like really cool and unique, you know, at this university and stuff, I don't see the point. Which, again, I'm not trying to come for people who love Dark Academia. Please don't think I'm coming for you. I'm so glad to the people who do love Dark Academia. I just feel like I need a little bit more. So yeah, The Secret History, like, it wasn't terrible again, but I don't have a desire to reread, so never gonna reread. Same with this one, I'm never gonna reread, but like, it is a really good middle grade. Okay, so this is Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin. I think I gave this one like 4 stars. Like, it was a really good middle grade, had a great strong story, and it kind of retells Snow White and Rose Red. However, I've never read Snow White and Rose Red, so I can't 100% confirm that, but it does have these beautiful images. It's illustrated. It is a very, it's just so cute. Like, it's a very good novel, and it does do a lot with the characters of Snow and Rose and how this like kind of fairy tale element is sort of woven into this while creating a really good kind of mystery story as well. Some of it was predictable, absolutely, but I feel like that comes with the territory when it comes to some fairy tale retellings. You can kind of guess where things are going, and unfortunately that was kind of the case with this too. But, you know, again, like, it wasn't bad, and that's going to be something that I will repeat during this video, is that a lot of the books I'm unhauling are books that I liked, but probably won't reread. And there are definitely books upstairs that I don't think I would probably reread either, but a lot of the times I keep books that have some kind of sentimentality to me too, and I just have a different system in my head. I feel like I need to go through every single book on my shelves and justify their places on the shelves. But, you know, when I was going through and picking which books to unhaul out of the ones that I've read over the last couple of years, these really were the only books that I could pull off the shelves and feel good about unhauling. In other books, I'm sure there's like at least 1 or 2 reasons why, even if I wouldn't reread it, why I still want it on my shelves. So yeah, like again, like I'm probably a little bit of a numpty, but it's fine. I read The Cloisters recently by Katie Hayes. Did not utilize again the plot enough, like what it promises in the summary. I feel like sometimes I maybe rely too much on what a book says it's going to be in like the inside dust jacket on the back of the book. I rely a lot on blurbs sometimes, even though I'm trying to cut that down because sometimes a blurb is a spoiler. Like there will be a spoiler in a blurb, so I try to avoid them. But like this one was promising some kind of like really atmospheric story that had to do with like tarot, and I don't think the tarot aspect of this was developed enough. There was enough kind of name drops and what to say. I'm not really good with tarot or anything, which is why I thought this would be fascinating. I thought I would learn through this a little bit more about it. But what's the words? Kind of like the names of the cards, like death and stuff like that. And I thought it would like delve more into that and like how that would affect the story, rather than it being a kind of ornamental kind of part of the story. It just didn't really do anything. And that's kind of what I was hoping for when I went into this story. And not just that, but I was supremely bored. I was bored by this. It is a little bit dark academia as well. So again, that probably factors into it too. I do feel like I will move on from dark academia, unfortunately. It was something that was all the rage. I'm not down with the kids, okay? It was all the rage years ago on BookTube. And when it works for people, it works. And I was desperate for it to work for me. But I feel like even just kind of the elements of it just don't translate well for me as a reader. So I need to just not ever kind of try another one. I mean, I never want to say never, but still. The Christmas Guest by Peter Swanson is another one that it was fine. Peter Swanson is a hit or miss author for me. He definitely has some that have surprised me and shocked me, and other ones that are so goddamn predictable and unoriginal that he can fall on either side. This one surprisingly falls in the middle, and I do think there was a part of this that ended with like such a good cliffhanger. I think it might be the first part, and Peter Swanson always has this kind of twist that I don't really personally see coming, even though I kind of always expect a twist from Peter Swanson, and I didn't see it coming, so I was like, okay, great, that's awesome. And then the second half of this bored me. Again, like I was just not interested after that midpoint. And when it comes to like Christmas thrillers, I haven't read enough of them, to be honest. And I feel like maybe the size of this being as short as it was meant that it wasn't enough time to really attach myself to anyone or attach myself to the story. It just kind of was over with. And then I thought, oh, I don't know what the point of it was. Like I feel like maybe sometimes I need to read for meaning. Other times I just read for fun, and I can read a really fun, entertaining book and just absolutely eat it up. But sometimes I'll read a book and I'll be like, okay, I want there to have been a reason for this. Like, what was the book trying to say? Like, what was the main theme running through it and things like that? What are the characters saying about whatever is happening at this time? I just felt like this book said a whole lot of nothing, and at the end of this, I was like, I think I've wasted my time. I could have read a different book during this time and been happier for it. But again, it's not bad. It's not bad. I don't think like half of these books are bad. Well, Witchcraft for Weeble Girls I did give 2 stars, and I DNF'd Murder at Holly House, so they were bad. Another book that I did like, and this is one that I was debating. I was debating whether I would get rid of it, but it's the Woodsmoke Women's Book of Spells by Rachel Greenlaw, and this gave me some really good wintry, practical magic type vibes, and I enjoyed it. There were some things about it that surprised me, some parts of it that were a lot heavier than I expected going into it, and it had an interesting story. I don't really have that many complaints about it, honestly. It's one that I'm just never going to reread. I see this on my shelves and I'm like, yeah, it's there. This is so hard to talk about. If it's a book that I'm not interested in, that's usually fine because I can but when it's coming time to review a book that I want to unhaul, but I don't really have the most justifiable of reasons for it, then, and it has only been about 3 months since I read this. And, the time and distance from this has made me realize it's something I don't really want to keep on my shelves, but it's not one that I would ever denounce. It's not one that I would ever put on a worst books list or a bad books list or even an average books list. I think this is slightly above average. A really interesting premise that I think does carry the story throughout. So if you're kind of looking for something a little bit wintry, a little bit practical magic-esque, it could be the one for you, honestly. It's not bad. It's not bad. Okay, I did DNF We Love You Bunny by Mona Award. I loved the first book, Bunny, but this one has a lot of second person. I feel like maybe someone did mention that it doesn't just stick in second person, but from what I'd read of it so far, I think I made it to around about page 50. A lot of it was second person. And I can understand to an extent why, because like We Love You Bunny, and it's like the bunnies talking to the main character from the first book who wrote a book about them. They're talking to her directly, and thus by making it second person, it feels like they're talking to me, the reader. But I don't like second person, like, it's just not something that I enjoy. So it was kind of like, I understand why it's being done, but I don't really love it. But also not just that, but I do feel like involving too many of the bunnies, learning more about them, removes a lot of the mystique and that like that mystery that I loved about them in the first book. There was a lot of ambiguity with them. In this one, it feels like so much is being told to me from their perspective that their mystery is just kind of slowly fading away. And I kind of want to protect my memory of the first book by DNF'ing this one and not continuing on. Like, in my mind, the first book Bunny is the only bunny book out there. The only manga that I feel like, I think this is the only manga, I'm going to unhaul Dorohedoro Volume 1. I don't often unhaul manga because I'm very easily pleased when it comes to manga, I'm not going to lie. But this one, I don't really like the art style. It's very chaotic, like a couple of pages there in color, but I don't love the art style. I find it a little bit messy as well. So there is like a little bit of like a dystopian kind of town in this, and it's just really hard to read. It's hard to really be able to see the place and the setting that the mangaka is trying to draw and depict, and it's just too all over the place, and I wasn't really sucked in with the story either. And it is the point of the story, for it being like so dark and almost hard to say and things like that. It does work in well with the plot of it, but I know just after the first volume, it's not a series I want to continue, because I can't say I can't say it, or at least I can say it, but it's not something that my eyes visually enjoy. I don't enjoy seeing this on the page. The mangaka is brilliantly talented, but it's not really my kind of thing. It's not really my speed. Not the kind of art style that I enjoy. So yeah, it's like, not that it was a bad story. I don't really like the art, which is a huge factor in why I read a lot of manga, is if the art is like really off-putting, I will most likely not continue it on, even if the plot grips me. It really just need to have like a really good balance of the two with a really visually appealing art style. Okay, a recent DNF as well was Goodnight Tokyo by Atsuhiro Yoshida. And yeah, this was in my 24 hours of reading recently. And I was so utterly disappointed by this one because it was supposed to be following this taxi driver between, was it like the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. in Tokyo? And honestly, the prospect of, you know, seeing Tokyo at night and exploring that city, and then the customers who will come to this taxi driver and hearing their stories and what this taxi driver does for them and stuff like that. That's the kind of thing that I was hoping this would focus on. But sometimes these books do have a character backstory, or they focus on a certain character, and if you don't kind of want to see that character or want to know more about that character, it can really deter you from the story itself. And I was deterred pretty early on. I knew I was wasting my time reading it because I wasn't really enjoying it, and it wasn't going the route that I thought it would, just based off the summary of the book. And there's another one coming up that I'm going to say the exact same things about. I do think maybe dark academia and healing fiction, slice of life fiction, I think I'm going to try and stay away from for a long while, and just chalk it up to it being a preference and just not really for me. So this is short enough. It could have worked. It could have worked, but I was trying to read hyped books in those 24 hours, and it was really killing my buzz. Okay, Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Huang was really good. Again, I think I gave it 3.5. Read this for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I liked it. I did like it. But I do feel like this is maybe a little bit more literary than I'm used to. And so, yeah, I'm a dumbass. Like, I couldn't really, like, wrap my head around it fully. But it was beautifully written. I really enjoyed the writing style. I loved what it had to say about, like, AI and, like, creation and artists and what artists can put out into the world. But also being in a world where there is barely any originality anymore. There's barely any like original ideas anymore. And it's something that I can really relate to as somebody who does booktube and tries to come up with creative ideas for videos. There was a lot to kind of project into this story that I could personally like relate to. But yeah, overall, again, it's not one I would ever reread. I don't know if maybe the writing style is maybe a little bit more literary than I'm used to. but I would be willing to try their other book because I've heard fantastic things about it. But yeah, this is one where I'm like, this is a good book. This is very good. I did DNF Holy Boy by Lee Hee-ju. I'm good about this one too. This is another one where I felt like that premise of how a K-pop idol has some really bad fans in the lengths that these fans will go to like get their idol, and this one is supposed to be a bit of a thriller, and I wasn't thrilled. I didn't feel any kind of thrill from it. The second chapter was like 100 pages, and it was so much backstory. It was so much, which I understand from a certain perspective, that you will want these characters to be built up in such a way that their actions later on will make more sense, and I totally get that. 100 pages for I honestly, I wanted to put the book down in the middle of it, but I kind of, if I'm going to DNF a book, I want to finish on that chapter. So I feel like I knew pretty early on within that chapter that I wanted it to be DNF'd, and I had to see the chapter through. And I had a miserable time reading that chapter. And again, like, not that I felt like it was like badly written or anything, it just wasn't the story I was expecting, and I was making myself miserable reading it. And that's something that I feel like as a reader, whether you can relate as well. But if I'm reading a book and it's making me actively miserable, then I absolutely will DNF. Even if people say, oh, you have to wait until this happens, you have to read at least like 200 pages before it gets good, I sometimes don't care. If it's making me miserable, I'm DNFing it. And this made me miserable. And yeah, I just feel like the summary, it wasn't kicking in. I was a good chunk of the way through, and I was just sick of my life. And Ash is just perched. He's been at the vets, well, he was at the vets yesterday, and we're trying to get him feeling a lot better. So we're just hanging out, aren't we? We're just hanging out. But Daddy still needs to work, so that's what I need to do, okay? So we're going to continue on. Nutcracked by Susan Adrian. This is another one where I felt like, because it is a middle grade, but the characters acted like young adult people who were like a little bit bitter, and I didn't care for their little squabbles and their dramas. And for this being, like, it looks like a very young middle grade, doesn't it? This cover is beautiful, very nicely illustrated, an absolute lie. It is a lie. It didn't feel as magical as I wanted it to. You know, every time she dances with the Nutcracker, she gets transported to the Nutcracker world and what have you. But it definitely didn't feel like that Christmas magic that I was wanting. It was almost like young adult. And again, that's absolutely fine. But don't market it as a middle grade and have this really cute cover for it to be a lot of talk about boy trouble and friendship trouble and stuff like that, when really I just want a cute Christmas story about the Nutcracker. Give me what you're selling me. So it was a bit of a disappointing read, honestly. And I love stories about the Nutcracker. I love the Nutcracker story itself. It was one of the worst Nutcracker sort of retellings, or like using that kind of story. It's one of the worst ones I've read. And so it's not a good enough reason to keep it at all. So it will definitely, hopefully, get read in the middle grade section of the library. Oh, I did also DNF. You Look Better as a Ghost. This is another one that sold me a lie, okay? You know what drew me in? You guys are probably sick. If you've been watching my vlogs and videos, mention this in a book haul, mention this in TBR Traders episode 1. But what made me get this book was I have a gift. I see people as ghosts before they die. Of course, it helps that I'm the one killing them. It was like the absolute tiniest factor of this story. And okay, not just that, okay, I can overlook that, but this main character, she did not have the charisma to be the unhinged female serial killer that I was rooting for. If you're also going to promise me this really sinister kind of character, then at least give her some charm, give her some charisma. She was so boring. She was one of the worst characters on the page. And don't get me started on the other characters as well. She would go to these meetings, right? And the characters were insufferable. It's not just the main character, but I feel like every other character was insufferable as well. So I didn't even care if she ended up getting away with what she was doing or not. And that is kind of maybe like the main draw, as well as the fact that she can see them as a ghost before she kills them, essentially. Or when she does kill them, she sees them briefly and that's it. That line here, ignore it. The Whistling by Rebecca Netley was another DNF. And again, it was, issues with the main character. She felt a little bit kind of obsessed, and she wasn't very self-aware about it as well. So I don't think that was intentional by the author though. It felt a lot like ignorance and a lot of like maybe self-importance there as well, but it was presented in a way in the narrative where we're supposed to side with the main character and not think the way she thinks of herself is wrong, kind of thing. So maybe it's something that I've looked too deeply into, but there was definitely a specific example that I mentioned in the vlog where I read this, where it rubbed me up the wrong way. And I was like, okay, I don't like her. But then the atmosphere of this just kind of plummeted as well. It wasn't really gripping me anymore. It has a storyline that I feel like has been done before quite a few dozen times. I feel like I've read the story before. And so without it sticking to anything original, I can't remember when I DNF'd it. I'm sorry, I should have written down. I think it was over 100 pages. I thought, okay, at this point, it's doing nothing new. It's saying nothing new. I don't really have any incentive to continue reading. I'm going to DNF it. So unfortunately, that's what happened. Okay, a book I did finish, and again, it was a good one. This was a good one, is The Confessions of Franny Langton by Sarah Collins. And I was debating getting rid of this one as well because this was in my very first ever video on BookTube. My first ever video on BookTube. It was a book haul, and this was in it. And I hadn't yet read it, so I read it recently. And it was good. It was good. It definitely leans heavily into the historical side, which is, again, a genre that can either work for me or doesn't work for me. And this did do a really good job with it. It was very riveting. You know, we have Franny Langton. She is being accused of murdering the people who she served. And there's definitely a really convoluted and complex kind of relationship that she had with both the people who she worked for. And it was interesting to a point. There is some sapphic-ness in this as well that I really did appreciate. But yeah, after finishing this, I was like, this is a one and done deal. I feel like as soon as you've read this story and you are aware that it's a good one, it is a good story, but I feel like you kind of know what to expect, and I don't know if it has that much rereadability. I mean, maybe it does for other people, but for me personally, I can't see myself rereading it. So I'm going to say goodbye to it. But yeah, got this when it first came out. It was in my very first book haul. So I was like, should I just keep it for that? And I do, again, I have some on my shelves upstairs that I've kept for sentimentality. Even if I didn't love it that much, there are memories attached to the books that I have. But I feel okay donating that one to the library. I really do. Next, I have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This was my worst book of 2025. I hated it. I hated the romance, could not get on board with it. And that was the main focus of this book. And so I just couldn't do it. I felt like this ripped off so many other young adult series. So again, this is another one that didn't do anything new. I again thought that I was reading a young adult story that came out in 2012. So with this having been a more recent one and one that is so popular on TikTok and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, I was expecting a little bit more, but it genuinely feels like, as I was reading this, that I was being transported like a whole decade ago. And I feel like we've come along so much as a society to feel like we need books like this. And yeah, the main romance was incredibly icky. It was just icky. I didn't root for it. I didn't know why we were romancing that kind of person, considering what they were doing. And it just, yeah, I couldn't stand it. I thought it was unoriginal. There were parts of it that were definitely entertaining, but that was because I was like, oh, that reminds me of the Hunger Games. Oh, that reminds me of the first Throne of Glass book. Oh, this, that, and the other. It wasn't because of what this was doing that was new, but it was because I was remembering what this was plagiarizing, essentially. Not that I'm coming for Lauren Roberts. Not that I'm saying she's a plagiarist. The Midnight Club by Christopher Pike was another good one that I read last year for a Halloween 24-hour. And like, it wasn't, again, like the kind of book I was expecting. This was a lot heavier than I expected. I've heard of Christopher Pike. I knew he was a good and prolific young adult horror writer from like the 80s and 90s. And I'd never read Christopher Pike before. You would think that I would have, considering I'm a big fan of R.L. Stine. But I'd never read Christopher Pike, and I was like, oh, damn. So this was my first one, and I was a little bit underwhelmed. It definitely did a lot of really serious and sad issues of like these teenagers being ill. And it reminded me of a TV show called Red Band Society that I watched years ago. And they're essentially telling scary stories. It didn't really work for me, like structurally as a narrative, it just didn't really work for me. And yeah, I feel like the heaviness of this brought my mood down. Now, I came into this expecting something a lot more chilling, but it didn't do that. It didn't do that at all. Not badly written by any means. I would try more Christopher Pike books, preferably ones that utilize more horror than this one. And I really do love this cover. I'm not a big fan of TV show or movie tie-in covers, but I really like this one. I am open to more Christopher Pike suggestions if anyone has any. Sorceress Comes to Call is probably a little bit controversial from T. Kingfisher here, but I did not care for the plot of this at all. I thought it was boring. We have Cordelia. Her mother is a sorcerer, but her mother is also abusive and awful. And that part of it was explored really well. I felt so much sympathy for Cordelia, but the plot itself was that her mother was going to try and marry someone rich and get them to live at this really nice place. And that was like not the entire story, of course, but that was a good chunk of this story. And again, cared naught. I cared naught. And I feel like I've read a lot of T. Kingfisher over a very brief period of time. And I think reading them back to back to back to back wasn't helping because I felt like a lot of them were quite similar. This one did feel different to the other ones that I'd read, but in maybe a more negative way because I was just supremely bored. I didn't like it. I thought it was rather generic, actually. I genuinely thought it was rather generic. Didn't care where the character arcs ended up going either. So it's one of those ones where maybe I've overloaded myself with the author and I should probably now, and that was the last one I had on my physical TBR, by the way. I don't own any other T. Kingfisher books I need to read. I feel like now I'm just going to take a breather, maybe return to another one of her stories that really sounds up my street and just give it some time to chill, you know. Lights Out by Kayla James. Oh, this is painful. This is a painful story, terribly written. It's an F1 romance, and I'm not saying I'm an F1 expert at all, but I feel like this was just too unbelievable. And I love the idea of having a powerful woman in the world of sports and especially in the F1. But for some reason, the author made this powerful woman a bumbling idiot when it came to, you know, being next to this really gorgeous guy who also drives for Formula One, and she needs picked up all the time and she's falling over, and the way that she got to being an F1 driver as well is so unrealistic. Virtually impossible, not just because of her gender, but because of the steps that she took to get there. This was badly researched. Like, I don't think this was researched at all, and it took me out of the story. It just didn't feel genuinely believable. And I would kill for a really good F1 story of a woman who has gotten herself there, and to see the inspiration that leads and how she got there as well, you know, and how she changes the sport for good. This one just wasn't researched, and I didn't like, I despised the main character's best friend. The way that they spoke to one another, they were children. They were actually children. Romance was, I DNF'd this. I got heated. I didn't like it. It's so bad. It's so bad. Another F1 romance that I'm unhauling, and it isn't like terrible, but it's something that I feel like doesn't capture the F1 spirit either. And that's Pole Position by Rebecca J. Caffrey. Like, this is a really steamy F1 romance that is just set in hotel rooms. You have the glitz and glamour of Formula One going across the world, like everywhere in the world they go, and they have like world of celebrities and fame and fortune. And this is just predominantly set in hotel rooms. And it was so lackluster. I got so disappointed the more I read of this, thinking this book is going to take me all over the world. It's going to show me a little bit more about F1 and stuff like that. But it's one that I feel like wasn't as researched as it should have been. And again, I'm not an F1 expert, but even then, some of the basic things, I would be like, well, that doesn't sound right. That does not sound right. And it takes me out of the story. And it's just so hard to stay invested in the story when you're constantly being taken out of it. So yeah, unfortunately, I did finish this one, but I'm just like, ugh. 30 Months Haunted by Jimmy Giuliano was a fun time. It had some really good, like, 90s, early 2000s vibes to it, but it kind of also lacked the substance of it as well, as in things will be mentioned, like Ask Jeeves will be mentioned, and floppy disks will be mentioned, and computers and stuff will be mentioned, but it would never actually utilize that in such a good way that the feeling of being in the 90s and 2000s would be 100% authentic. It just felt like a lot of buzzwords a lot of the time, and it was just like, oh, it's just a way of this author kind of making you or reminding you that this is set in the early 2000s. The main character as well. What do you mean you're putting your student's essay, like her personal essay and stuff, on the internet in the year 2000? I understand understand things would be a lot different then. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure they would be so different then. But there was like so many personal things about this character, like the child that this teacher has taken their kind of personal writings and putting them on her blog. I really didn't enjoy what she was doing, like, at all. And even now, like, months after finishing this, the story has not stayed with me. I don't think this could have gripped me any more than it did. And by then, the grip was lackluster. It was barely holding on to me. It started out pretty well. But yeah, the more it went on, the more I was like praying for it to end. Oh, Possession of Alba Diaz by Isabel Cañas, again, was another good one. Like, I really enjoyed this one. Fantastically written, great story. But again, it is a story that I feel like I have read before too. It wasn't wholly new to me. And I will absolutely check out more things from this author as well. But I feel like because I read back to back to back some possession stories, I think I was just fatigued from that kind of subgenre of horror. So it probably wasn't really the book's fault, more so mine for reading too much of the same thing at once. So I do think I reflect that in my rating of this book. And again, me saying that's not a bad book at all, it is very good. It's a me thing, 100%. And maybe a reread of this when I've had some distance from this and other possession stories. I think some distance might make me appreciate the story more. Maybe be enticed to reread it to see if I do like my opinion on it more. But then I think there are definitely more books that I need to read for the first time, and I might not change my rating that much on this. So I think it's probably just safe to let it go. Let it go, let it go. Ashes so beautiful. Not many more left now. Wild Seed by Octavia A. Butler was another good book. I read this for our fantasy bingo, and I've got so much cat hair on my face right now. I think the concept of this is far bigger than my brain. I did struggle a little bit to understand the world and to really wrap my head around what the characters were doing. This spans like centuries. The characters are gods, and it was just like a lot for my brain to handle. This is the first book in a series, and I don't think I will continue. When I first finished this, I thought, oh, maybe I would read the next one, but now that's been a few months, I don't think I will. I don't own the second book, so I don't think I will waste money on it. I do love Octavia A. Butler though. I have absolutely been obsessed with Kindred, and I do want more from this author that I think I will enjoy. I think I'll enjoy Parable of the Sower, but for Wild Seed, I think this is just something that ended up not being my thing, despite it being a fantasy. It was too big brain for me. It's me, not the book. Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. This is my first Rachel Harrison book, and just like the Alba Diaz book, it's just one of those things where it was too many like haunted house stories, one after the other essentially, and I felt that I didn't really take too much more from this one. I did like the family dynamic in this, but again, I have seen family dynamics depicted better in other stories, and yeah, the overall plot itself again felt a little bit generic, and yeah, like not badly written, not a bad story whatsoever, just one that I have seen done better elsewhere, unfortunately. Hasn't put me off Rachel Harrison. I do own Cackle. I still have Cackle upstairs, and I will get to it at some point. Next, I have Crypt of the Moon Spider by Nathan Ballingrud. This is so tiny. And this, just like the other book I mentioned before when I finished it, The Christmas Guest, I finished this and I was like, what's the point? What's the point? I didn't really take that much enjoyment from it. Love the premise of this being set in like the 1920s, and there's like this insane asylum essentially on the moon, and there's like a forest with this whole lore attached to it, and this like moon spider thing. The ideas were there, but the author made this rather tedious and boring to get through despite the length of it, and some of it did come across as a little bit confusing. A lot of story threads I feel like went round and round in circles and didn't really get anywhere. Maybe a little bit like a spider's web. Maybe that was again like the point of the story, but I need a little bit more, and it didn't give me that little bit more. I don't know if novellas are my thing then, because this is like the second one I've mentioned in this video, and it just seems like novellas just don't really hit the same for me than like full-length novels. So, but then again, there have been novellas that I have enjoyed, but Crypt of the Moon Spider, I didn't like it. What a Moon by Samantha Soto Yambo. This is one where, again, I was like, this is good. Like, it is a good story. Like, it isn't doing anything wrong, essentially, apart from the Titanic misinformation, which I will always bring up. But it hasn't stuck with me. I read this over a year ago now. It's something that I only wanted to keep because I love how it looks. I think it's a gorgeous book. But it didn't leave an impression on me. I love the idea of being like transported through puddles and going on this like exploration, adventure kind of storyline. But I found it rather dull outside of that. And I feel like one of the reasons why that is because the characters didn't stay with me either. It felt really hard to attach myself to the story when the characters just were given absolutely nothing for me. And the similar experience with the Elsewhere Express by the same author. Although this one, again, I feel like lacked the main theme that this wanted to explore. So it's about, you know, this train where people wake up on and they have to sort of find their life's purpose. And I feel like that was the kind of theme that got left on the wayside as we explored and had a more faster paced plot with a kind of like stowaway on board. And I feel like that kind of took away from what the book was trying to say in its messaging. So I did feel underwhelmed yet again. Again, good story. Like, I didn't hate it. It wasn't bad. But I really wanted that main theme to be explored way better than it was. And again, it had like the kind of different expectations than I was expecting. I picked this up thinking it would be a little bit more like Spirited Away or The Polar Express and things like that. And more fool I, it just didn't really... I feel like maybe it focused a little bit more on plot, which sometimes can be a very good thing for me again, but also characters. I didn't love the characters yet again. Good story, just not good for me. And then finally, The Passengers on the Honkyu Line by Hiro Arakawa. Again, this is like the Japanese healing fiction, the kind of slice of life. And I really wanted this book to be more about the passengers on the Hankyu line and learning more about the line and how they interact on this line. But there is just massive chunks of character backstory that has nothing to do with it. And it is, again, important to build those characters up and learn more about them. And there was definitely one character backstory that I did love, and it showed like a woman's bravery as she dealt with some abuse. So I really did love the inspiration there, but other than that, I didn't really care for a whole lot of other storylines, and it did feel like the whole passengers on the Honkyu line, it just wasn't utilized the way that I wanted it to. Again, like, reader expectation versus what you're getting. Is it fair of me to expect and demand more from a book when an author writes a story the way that they want to write a story? I feel so. Like, it probably isn't fair, a lot of the things I've said about these books, 100%, but these are my feelings. These are the reasons why I don't really want to hold on to these books. And Passengers is a book where I feel like I was like, okay, I just don't think these kinds of stories are for me anymore, and that's okay. We know this now. We have done the trialing and the erroring, and we can move on from that kind of story, and hopefully moving forward, I can stick to the genres. And it's always good to try new genres and try different things, of course, but maybe stick to the genres like I kind of know that I'm going to love, especially when it comes to buying books. And if I'm unsure, definitely library. So for instance, the Samantha Soto Yambo book, I got the Elsewhere Express because I loved the idea of the plot, but I feel like I probably should have just checked that out in my library. So now my library's going to get it. So that was my 31 book unhaul. Hopefully you still enjoyed it, even though I feel like I was maybe a little bit lackluster on some of the reviews there, but hopefully I gave enough of my reasons why I don't really want these books on my shelves anymore. Good to have the space, obviously, for books that I will love, and a good clear out is always so needed and so refreshing sometimes as well. So hopefully you enjoyed. Please do like the video if you did, subscribe if you haven't already, leave all your comments down below, let me know if you've read anything, and if you disagreed on anything, that's absolutely fine too. But I want to give a huge thank you to my channel members for supporting my channel. If you join my channel membership, then the link is down below. But I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye.